Marcus Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan office, watching the city bustle 40 stories below. His reflection stared back, sharp suit, tired eyes, and the kind of expression that came from building a tech empire from nothing. At 38, he controlled a company worth $8 billion, but lately, success felt hollow. His phone buzzed. Another meeting request, another investor call, another reason to stay late at the office while his 10-year-old daughter Emma waited at home with the staff. The guilt gnawed at him, but Chen Industries needed his attention. The hostile takeover attempt from Blackstone Corp demanded every ounce of his focus. "Mr. Chen?" His assistant Sarah knocked softly. "Your car is ready for the airport." Marcus nodded, grabbing his briefcase. Another business trip. This time to Tokyo for 3 days of negotiations that could secure the Asian market expansion. He'd promised Emma he would read her bedtime story tonight, but duty called. She would understand. She always did. The flight felt endless despite the luxury of his private jet. Marcus tried to focus on quarterly reports, but his mind wandered to Emma. Since her mother Victoria died in that car accident 2 years ago, everything changed. The vibrant, laughing child became quiet and withdrawn. Marcus threw himself into work to escape the pain, telling himself he was securing Emma's future. But the distance between them grew wider each month. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, the housekeeper he'd hired 6 months ago. The 50-year-old woman came with impeccable references from other wealthy families. Quiet, efficient, professional. Emma seemed comfortable with her, which was more than Marcus could say about the previous 3 housekeepers who'd quit within weeks. Children could be difficult, especially grieving ones. The Tokyo meetings were brutal. 18-hour days, endless presentations, and corporate politics that would make a politician blush. Marcus lived on coffee and determination, closing the deal that would expand Chen Industries across 3 new countries. Victory should have felt sweet, but exhaustion dulled everything. On the 3rd day, as he sat in his hotel room reviewing contracts, an email from Emma's school appeared in his inbox. His stomach dropped. Parent-teacher conferences were next week, and he'd completely forgotten. Again. Mrs. Henderson, Emma's teacher, requested an urgent meeting about Emma's academic performance and social adjustment. Marcus called home immediately. Mrs. Rodriguez answered on the 2nd ring. "How is Emma?" he asked without preamble. "She is well, Mr. Chen, eating her dinner now." Mrs. Rodriguez's accent was slight but warm. "She asked when you come home." "Tomorrow night, the red-eye flight." Marcus hesitated. "Mrs. Rodriguez, has Emma seemed different lately? Her teacher wants to meet." A pause. "She is good girl, Mr. Chen. Very smart. Maybe just need more." "More what?" "Nothing, sir. She just need time." Something in her tone bothered him, but Marcus was too tired to probe deeper. He'd deal with whatever was happening when he got home. The flight back was turbulent, matching his mood. Marcus stared out the small window at the clouds, thinking about Emma's recent report card. Her grades were excellent, but the teacher's comments mentioned emotional withdrawal and reluctance to participate in group activities. When had his bright social daughter become so isolated? He remembered Emma before Victoria died. She would run to the door when he came home, chattering about her day, showing him drawings, asking him to push her on the swing in their backyard. Now their conversations were polite and brief. When had they become strangers living in the same house? The plane landed at midnight. Marcus decided to surprise Emma by coming home early instead of going to his Manhattan apartment. Maybe they could have breakfast together before school. When was the last time they'd shared a meal? His driver navigated the quiet streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, toward the sprawling estate Marcus had bought when Emma was born. The house sat on 12 acres, complete with gardens, a pool, and enough space for a family to grow. Now it felt too big, too empty, despite housing 3 full-time staff members. As they approached the gates, Marcus noticed lights on in the main house. Mrs. Rodriguez probably left them on for security. The housekeeper was thorough about such details. She'd quickly proven herself invaluable, managing the household staff, maintaining the estate, and handling the endless details that came with his lifestyle. Marcus let himself in through the front door, his footsteps echoing in the marble foyer. The house smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. Mrs. Rodriguez must have been baking again. Emma had mentioned loving her cookies during one of their brief phone conversations. He headed toward the kitchen to grab some water before going upstairs. As he rounded the corner, he stopped. Soft voices drifted from the family room, along with warm light spilling into the hallway. Who was up this late? Marcus moved quietly toward the sound. Through the partially open French doors, he could see into the cozy sitting area his wife had designed. Emma sat curled on the sofa in her pajamas, her long black hair loose around her shoulders. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside her holding a book. And then the princess realized she didn't need rescuing, Mrs. Rodriguez was saying, her voice animated despite the late hour. She had the power to save herself and her kingdom all along. Emma giggled, a sound Marcus hadn't heard in months. I like that story better than the old one. Why do all the princesses in the other books need princes to save them? Because those stories were written long ago, when people thought different things about girls. But you know what I think? What? I think girls like you are the new princesses, smart, strong, and brave enough to save kingdoms and build companies and become anything they want. Emma leaned against Mrs. Rodriguez's shoulder. Do you really think I could build a company like Daddy? Mija, I think you could build something even better. Your daddy, he is very smart with business, yes? But you have something special. Like what? Mrs. Rodriguez set down the book and turned to face Emma fully. You have a big heart. You care about people. When you build your company someday, you will remember that business is not just about money. It's about helping people, making life better. Marcus found himself leaning closer to the door, captivated by this conversation. When had Emma become interested in business? When had she started thinking about the future beyond princesses and fairy tales? Mrs. Rodriguez? Emma's voice became quieter. Do you think Daddy misses me when he travels? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He pressed his back against the wall, suddenly feeling like an intruder in his own home. Oh, sweet girl. Of course he does. Your daddy works so hard because he loves you. He wants to give you everything in the world. But I don't need everything in the world. I just want him to come home more. I want to tell him about school and show him my drawings and ask him to help with my math homework like other dads do. Marcus closed his eyes. The pain in his daughter's voice was unmistakable. You know what I think? Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. I think your daddy is a little lost right now. When people are sad, sometimes they think working more will make the sadness go away. But it doesn't work like that. Is he sad about Mommy? Yes, Mija. Just like you are sad about Mommy. But sometimes grown-ups don't know how to share their sadness. They think they have to be strong all the time. Emma was quiet for a moment. I miss her too. But I miss Daddy even when he's here. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled Emma closer. Can I tell you a secret? Your daddy talks about you all the time when he calls to check on the house. He asks if you're eating well, if you're happy, if you need anything. Last week, he spent 10 minutes asking about your science project. Really? Really. And you know what else? He keeps your drawings in his office. All of them. Even the ones you threw away. He asked me to keep. Marcus remembered fishing those crumpled drawings from Emma's wastebasket, smoothing them out and adding them to the growing collection on his office wall. He hadn't realized Emma knew about it. He does? Emma's voice brightened. Si, mi amor, your daddy loves you very much. Sometimes love looks different than we expect, but it's always there. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Emma yawned, and Mrs. Rodriguez began gathering the books scattered on the coffee table. "Time for bed, little princess. Tomorrow is a school day. Will you make pancakes for breakfast?" "Of course. The blueberry ones you like." As they stood to leave, Emma suddenly hugged Mrs. Rodriguez tightly. "Thank you for reading with me, and for listening when I talk about Daddy and Mommy and everything." "Mrs. Brown?" Rodriguez returned the embrace. "That's what families do, mija. They listen to each other." Marcus watched them head upstairs, Mrs. Rodriguez's hand gently guiding Emma toward her bedroom. The word family echoed in his mind. When had Mrs. Rodriguez become family to Emma? And why hadn't he noticed? He waited until he heard bedroom doors close before moving through the house. In his study, he poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and sat heavily in his leather chair. The wall opposite his desk was covered with Emma's artwork, colorful drawings of houses and flowers and stick figures labeled Daddy and Emma, holding hands under smiling suns. When had he stopped looking at these drawings? When had he stopped seeing what his daughter was trying to tell him through her art? His laptop chimed with incoming emails. Chen Industries never slept, and neither did the demands on his attention. But for the first time in 2 years, Marcus closed the laptop without reading them. Instead, he studied Emma's drawings, really seeing them. In the corner of almost every picture was a small figure with dark hair and a kind smile, usually standing near Emma's stick figure. He'd assumed it was meant to be Victoria, but looking closer, he realized the figure was too tall, too present in Emma's daily scenes. This was Mrs. Rodriguez. The woman had somehow become the mother figure Emma desperately needed, while Marcus buried himself in corporate battles and hostile takeovers. She was reading bedtime stories, making breakfast, listening to Emma's fears and dreams and hopes for the future. She was doing all the things Marcus should have been doing. He thought about Mrs. Rodriguez's words. "Your daddy is a little lost right now." The truth of it settled in his chest like a weight. He was lost, completely, utterly lost in a maze of his own making, using work to avoid the grief that still threatened to overwhelm him whenever he slowed down enough to feel it. But Emma was feeling it too, and she was only 10 years old, trying to navigate loss and confusion without her father's guidance or presence. She'd found comfort and stability with Mrs. Rodriguez instead. The woman Marcus paid to clean his house had become the anchor his daughter needed. The scotch burned as he finished it. Marcus looked at his phone. 3:15 in the morning. In a few hours, Emma would wake up expecting Mrs. Rodriguez's blueberry pancakes and warm conversation. She might ask about when Daddy would be home, just as she had countless other mornings. But tomorrow would be different. Marcus made a decision that surprised him with its clarity. He would be there for breakfast. He would ask Emma about her science project. He would look at whatever drawings she wanted to show him. And somehow he needed to thank the woman who had stepped into the gap he'd created, who had given his daughter the love and attention she deserved while he was too blind to see what was happening in his own home. As he headed upstairs to his bedroom, Marcus passed Emma's room. The door was slightly open, and he could see her sleeping peacefully under covers decorated with stars and moons. Mrs. Rodriguez had left a glass of water on the nightstand and arranged Emma's stuffed animals just the way she liked them. The attention to detail, the care, the love, it was all there. A stranger had loved his daughter better than he had. The realization should have been devastating, but instead, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. If Mrs. Rodriguez could see what Emma needed, if she could provide the warmth and security his daughter craved, then maybe there was still time to repair the damage his absence had caused. Maybe it wasn't too late to become the father Emma deserved. But first, he needed to understand exactly how much Mrs. Rodriguez had been doing, how much she'd been giving of herself to fill the void he'd left behind. Tomorrow's breakfast would be just the beginning of discovering what he'd been missing while he conquered boardrooms and built an empire at the expense of the most important relationship in his life. Marcus woke before dawn, something that never happened unless he was catching an early flight. For once, work emails could wait. He showered and dressed quietly, then made his way downstairs to find Mrs. Rodriguez already in the kitchen, preparing ingredients for Emma's promised pancakes. She looked up in surprise. "Mr. Chen, I did not expect you until tonight." Change of plans. He poured himself coffee from the pot she'd prepared. "I wanted to have breakfast with Emma before school." Mrs. Rodriguez's face brightened. "She will be so happy. She was asking yesterday if you would be home for her school presentation on Friday." Marcus frowned. "What presentation?" "For her class project about family traditions. She has been working on it for 2 weeks." Mrs. Rodriguez began mixing pancake batter, her movements efficient but gentle. "She wants to talk to you about our family traditions, but you have been traveling." "Our family traditions?" Marcus realized he couldn't name a single tradition they'd maintained since Victoria died. "What did she choose?" Mrs. Rodriguez hesitated, her wooden spoon slowing. "Maybe you should ask her yourself, Mr. Chen." Before Marcus could respond, footsteps clattered down the stairs. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing her school uniform, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She stopped short when she saw her father. "Daddy?" Her voice held surprise and something else. Hope, maybe. "You're home early." "I wanted to have breakfast with you." Marcus felt awkward, like he was meeting his daughter for the first time. "Mrs. Rodriguez is making your favorite pancakes." Emma's face lit up. "With blueberries?" "Of course." "Mija," Mrs. Rodriguez said, flipping the first pancake with practiced ease. "Sit with your daddy. I will have these ready in just a minute." Father and daughter sat at the breakfast table in silence for a moment, the kitchen filled with the warm scent of vanilla and cinnamon. Marcus searched for something to say, realizing he knew almost nothing about Emma's daily life. "How's school?" he finally asked. "Good." Emma swung her legs under the table. "We're learning about the solar system in science. Did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons?" "I didn't know that." Marcus found himself genuinely interested. "Which planet is your favorite?" "Saturn, because of its rings. They're made of ice and rock, and they're so pretty. Mrs. Rodriguez showed me pictures online." Emma glanced toward the stove where the housekeeper was humming softly. "She helps me with research for my projects." Another thing Marcus hadn't known. "That's wonderful. Tell me about your family traditions presentation." Emma's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Oh, that." Mrs. Rodriguez set a plate of perfectly golden pancakes in front of Emma, then placed a smaller portion before Marcus. She started to leave, but Emma caught her hand. "Stay and eat with us," Emma said. "Please?" Mrs. Rodriguez looked uncertain. "I should clean the upstairs." "The upstairs can wait," Marcus said, surprising himself. "Please, join us." As Mrs. Rodriguez reluctantly took a seat, Emma brightened again. "Now I can tell you both about my presentation. Mrs. Rodriguez, you can help explain the parts I forgot." "What parts?" Marcus asked. Emma took a big bite of pancake, chewing thoughtfully. "Well, I picked 3 traditions. The first one is Sunday afternoon cooking. Mrs. Rodriguez teaches me to make different foods from her family recipes. Last week we made tamales, and the week before we learned empanadas." Marcus realized he'd never been home for these cooking sessions. "That sounds wonderful." "The second tradition is our evening stories," Emma continued. "Every night, Mrs. Rodriguez reads me a different story, but then we talk about what it means and how it connects to real life. She says stories are just lessons dressed up in pretty words." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled softly. "Emma always asks such smart questions about the characters." "And the third tradition?" Marcus asked. though he was beginning to understand how completely Mrs. Rodriguez had filled the parental void in Emma's life. Emma looked down at her plate. The third one is, well, it's checking in. Every day when I get home from school, Mrs. Rodriguez asks me 3 questions. What was the best part of your day? What was the hardest part? And what are you excited about for tomorrow? She says it helps her understand how I'm feeling inside. The simple ritual hit Marcus harder than any boardroom defeat ever could. Such a basic thing, checking in with your child, understanding their emotional state, being present for their daily experiences, and he'd missed it entirely. That's a beautiful tradition, he said quietly. Mrs. Rodriguez says traditions aren't just about what we do, but about how they make us feel connected to the people we love. Emma looked between her father and the housekeeper. These traditions make me feel like I belong somewhere. The words hung in the air. Marcus felt the weight of his absence like a physical pressure on his chest. Emma had found belonging with Mrs. Rodriguez because he'd been too wrapped up in his own grief to provide it himself. Emma, he began, but his phone rang. The caller ID showed his CEO's direct line. Marcus looked at the phone, then at Emma, who was watching him with resigned acceptance in her eyes. She'd seen this moment countless times before, Daddy choosing work over family time. Marcus declined the call and turned the phone face down on the table. Tell me more about the cooking tradition, he said. What's your favorite recipe so far? Emma's eyes widened with surprise, then joy. Really? You want to hear about it? For the next 20 minutes, Emma chatted enthusiastically about cooking techniques, ingredient combinations, and the stories Mrs. Rodriguez told while they worked. Marcus found himself genuinely engaged, laughing at Emma's descriptions of kitchen mishaps and impressed by how much she'd learned. I should drive you to school today, Marcus said when Emma finished eating. You don't have to, Mr. Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez said. I can take her as usual. I want to. Marcus looked at Emma. If that's okay with you? Yes. Emma jumped up to get her backpack. Can we listen to music in the car? Mrs. Rodriguez let me pick the radio station when she drives me. Of course. During the drive to Emma's private school, she chattered about her friends, her teachers, and her upcoming assignments. Marcus realized how much he'd missed, not just events and activities, but Emma's personality. She was funny, thoughtful, and incredibly bright. When had she become so articulate, so curious about the world? Daddy? Emma asked as they pulled into the school's circular drive. Will you be home for dinner tonight? Marcus thought about his calendar. 3 meetings, 2 conference calls, and a stack of contracts waiting for review. Yes, he said. I'll be home for dinner. Emma's smile could have powered the city. She kissed his cheek and ran toward the school building, turning to wave before disappearing inside. On the drive back to the house, Marcus called his assistant. Cancel everything after 3 o'clock today. Reschedule the Patterson meeting for tomorrow and push the conference call to next week. Sir, the Patterson meeting is critical for the merger. Then it can wait 1 more day. Marcus surprised himself with the firmness in his voice. And Sarah? Going forward, I want every Friday afternoon blocked out. No meetings, no calls, no exceptions. When he returned home, Mrs. Rodriguez was cleaning the breakfast dishes. She looked nervous, as if she expected to be in trouble for overstepping boundaries. Mrs. Rodriguez, could we talk for a moment? She dried her hands on a kitchen towel, her expression worried. Of course, Mr. Chen. They sat in the living room, and Marcus struggled to find the right words. I want to thank you for what you've been doing with Emma. The traditions, the conversations, the care you've shown her. I had no idea how much you'd taken on. Mrs. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. I hope I did not overstep. Emma is such a special girl, and she seems so lonely. I just wanted to help. You've done more than help. You've been... Marcus paused, the truth difficult to admit. You've been the parent she needed when I wasn't available to be one. Tears gathered in Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes. "Mr. Chen, I hope you don't think I was trying to replace you. Emma loves you so much. She talks about you all the time, shows me your pictures, tells me about your work. She is so proud to be your daughter." "But she needed more than a proud father who's never around." Marcus leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, how has she been? Really been?" Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "The first few months I worked here, Emma was very sad. She missed her mother, yes, but she also missed you. She would wait by the window every evening, hoping you would come home early. When you called to say you would be late, she would go to her room and cry." The words cut deep, but Marcus needed to hear them. "But slowly she began to open up," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "She started asking me about my family, my life before working here. She wanted to help with cooking, to learn about different cultures. I think she was looking for ways to connect, to feel part of something bigger than her sadness. And you gave her that connection. I gave her what any child needs: attention, patience, and someone to listen to her thoughts and feelings. But Mr. Chen, what she really wants is her father. She needs to know that you see her, that you value her, that she matters more than your business." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've been using work to avoid dealing with Victoria's death. I thought if I stayed busy enough, focused enough on building something for Emma's future, the pain would eventually go away." "And how is that working for you?" The question was gentle but direct. Marcus smiled ruefully. "It's not. The pain is still there, and now I've created new pain by neglecting my daughter. Grief is like the ocean," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly. "You cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to swim. Emma has been learning to swim alone. She needs her father to swim beside her." They talked for another hour. Mrs. Rodriguez told him about Emma's nightmares in the first month after Victoria's funeral, how she'd started keeping a journal to process her feelings, how she'd begun asking deep questions about life and death and meaning. She shared Emma's fears about forgetting her mother's voice, her worry that her father didn't love her anymore, her growing confidence as she learned new skills and discovered her own interests. "She wants to learn piano," Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned. "She found your wife's old sheet music and asked if she could take lessons. She says music might help her feel close to her mother." Marcus remembered Victoria playing piano in the evenings, filling their home with beautiful melodies. He'd sold the piano after her death, unable to bear the silence where music used to live. "I'll look into piano lessons," he said. "And maybe we can find another piano for the house." When Mrs. Rodriguez returned to her work, Marcus sat alone in his study. But instead of opening his laptop, he looked at Emma's drawings on the wall. He saw them differently now. Not just a child's artistic efforts, but communications he'd been too busy to decode. In drawing after drawing, Emma had documented her life: birthday parties where stick figures wore party hats, but one figure stood apart holding a phone, family dinners where only two figures sat at a large table, Christmas mornings where presents were opened alone while other figures were labeled "at work." But the recent drawings showed changes. 3 figures appeared regularly now, often engaged in activities together. Emma had been documenting her new reality, a reality where Mrs. Rodriguez had become family. Marcus's phone buzzed with urgent messages about the Blackstone situation. For 2 years, these crises had felt like life-or-death emergencies requiring his immediate attention. Today, they felt like distractions from the real emergency he'd been ignoring: his relationship with his daughter. He spent the afternoon reviewing Emma's school records, reading teacher comments he'd previously skimmed, understanding for the first time the full picture of his daughter's academic and social development. Emma was gifted, the reports showed, but she was also struggling with confidence and social connections. Several teachers noted her tendency to work alone and her reluctance to participate in group activities. At 3 o'clock, Marcus left the office and drove to Emma's school. He waited in the pickup line like dozens of other parents, something he'd never done before. When Emma spotted him through the car window, her surprised joy made every missed board meeting worth it. "How was your day?" he asked as she buckled her seatbelt. "It was good. Sarah Chen asked if you could come to her birthday party next weekend. Her mom wants to meet you. And Mrs. Patterson said I could read my family traditions presentation to the class on Friday instead of just showing the poster. And Tommy Rodriguez, he's not related to our Mrs. Rodriguez, said his dad might teach us about computers if enough parents volunteer for career day." Emma chattered the entire drive home, filling him in on the social dynamics of fifth grade, her upcoming assignments, and her thoughts about everything from lunch quality to playground politics. Marcus found himself genuinely entertained by her observations and impressed by her social awareness. "Daddy," Emma said as they pulled into their driveway, "are you going to stay home tonight? Like, really stay home? Or are you going to work in your study until I'm asleep?" The question was asked matter-of-factly, without accusation, but it hit Marcus like a physical blow. Emma had learned not to expect his full presence even when he was physically in the house. "I'm really staying home tonight," he said. "In fact, I was thinking we could ask Mrs. Rodriguez to teach us both how to make those empanadas you mentioned." Emma's squeal of delight was answer enough. Friday afternoon arrived faster than Marcus expected. For the first time in Emma's school career, he sat in a tiny plastic chair in Mrs. Henderson's classroom, waiting for his daughter's presentation about family traditions. The other parents looked surprised to see him. Apparently, his reputation as an absent father was well established in the school community. Emma stood at the front of the classroom, holding a colorful poster board covered with photos Mrs. Rodriguez had helped her print and arrange. Marcus recognized some of the images: Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez cooking together, the two of them reading in the family room, Emma proudly displaying a finished craft project. "My presentation is about the traditions that make a family feel like home," Emma began, her voice clear and confident. "I learned that traditions don't have to be old or fancy. They just have to bring people together and show love." She explained each tradition with enthusiasm, describing the cooking sessions, the bedtime stories, and the daily check-ins. Marcus watched the other parents' faces soften as Emma spoke about feeling heard and valued through these simple rituals. "The best part about our traditions is that they helped me understand something important," Emma concluded. "Family isn't just about who you're related to. It's about who shows up for you, who listens to your dreams, and who helps you feel brave enough to try new things." The classroom erupted in applause. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as Emma smiled directly at him. In just 1 week of being truly present, he'd learned more about his daughter than in the previous 6 months combined. After school, they drove home together, Emma chattering excitedly about her classmates' reactions and her teacher's praise. Marcus had cleared his entire schedule for the afternoon, something that would have been unthinkable just days before. "Mrs. Rodriguez is going to be so proud," Emma said as they pulled into the driveway. "She helped me practice my presentation every night this week." They found Mrs. Rodriguez in the garden, tending to the vegetable bed she'd planted behind the house. Marcus had never noticed them before. Neat rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs that apparently supplied ingredients for many of Emma's cooking lessons. "Mija," Mrs. Rodriguez called, wiping dirt from her hands as Emma ran toward her. "How did the presentation go?" "Perfect. Everyone loved it, and Mrs. Henderson said it was one of the best she'd ever heard. And Daddy was there. He sat in the front row." Mrs. Rodriguez looked surprised. "Mr. Chen, you went to the school?" "I wouldn't have missed it," Marcus said, realizing the truth of those words. Emma was incredible. She spoke about traditions and family in a way that made everyone in that room think differently about what really matters. That evening, the three of them cooked dinner together. Mrs. Rodriguez guided Marcus and Emma through making her grandmother's enchiladas, patiently correcting Marcus's clumsy attempts at rolling the tortillas, while Emma giggled at his mistakes. I'm terrible at this, Marcus said, looking at his lopsided enchilada. You're learning, Mrs. Rodriguez corrected gently. That's different than being terrible. Learning means you'll get better with practice. Emma nodded sagely. That's what Mrs. Rodriguez always tells me when I get frustrated. She says mistakes are just practice in disguise. As they ate, Emma naturally fell into her tradition of sharing the best part, hardest part, and most exciting part of her day. Marcus found himself doing the same, talking about a difficult business decision and how proud he'd felt watching Emma's presentation. What about you, Mrs. Rodriguez? Emma asked. What was your best part today? Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. Seeing your father's face when you said family is about who shows up for you. I think that message reached exactly the person who needed to hear it. After dinner, they settled in the family room for Emma's bedtime story. Tonight, Marcus read while Mrs. Rodriguez and Emma listened. He chose one of Victoria's favorite books, a story about a brave princess who saved her kingdom through kindness rather than sword fighting. That reminds me of you, Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma said sleepily. You saved our kingdom with kindness. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes filled with tears. Oh, sweet girl, you and your father saved yourselves. I just helped a little bit. After tucking Emma into bed, Marcus and Mrs. Rodriguez sat on the back patio, sharing a pot of the cinnamon tea she'd introduced to their evening routine. I need to ask you something, Marcus said carefully, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Mrs. Rodriguez tensed slightly. Of course. How much have you sacrificed to be here for Emma? I mean really sacrificed. Your own life, your own family, your own needs. For a long moment, Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. When I first came to work for you, I thought this would be like my other positions. Clean the house, manage the staff, stay professional and distant. But Emma, she shook her head. That little girl was drowning in sadness, and you were so lost in your own grief that you couldn't see it. Marcus waited for her to continue. I have 2 grown sons in Mexico. I see them twice a year because I send most of my salary to help with their families. I had planned to work for wealthy families for 5 more years, then return home to be near my grandchildren. Mrs. Rodriguez looked directly at him. But Emma needed more than a housekeeper. She needed someone to see her, to value her thoughts and feelings, to help her navigate losing her mother while feeling like she was losing her father too. The weight of her sacrifice settled over Marcus. So you put your own life on hold? Not on hold. I chose a different path. Emma became my heart, my purpose. Watching her heal, seeing her confidence grow, being trusted with her fears and dreams. It has been an honor, Mr. Chen. But yes, it meant giving up my original plans. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what this woman had done for his family. Finally, he spoke. I want to make you a different offer, not as an employer, but as family. Mrs. Rodriguez looked surprised. I want you to stay, not as hired help, but as Emma's grandmother figure. The person she already sees you as. I want to bring your sons and their families here, help them establish themselves if they're interested. I want to make sure Emma never loses the stability and love you've given her. Tears ran down Mrs. Rodriguez's cheeks. Mr. Chen, I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Say you'll let me try to repay some of what you've given us. Over the following weeks, Marcus restructured his entire approach to work and family. He hired a capable COO to handle day-to-day operations, established firm boundaries around his time at home, and began the process of learning to be the father Emma deserved. The changes weren't always smooth. Marcus struggled with guilt over missed opportunities and grief over Victoria's absence. There were evenings when work crises tempted him to retreat to his study, and mornings when old habits pulled him toward the office instead of the breakfast table. But Emma's joy in his presence, Her eager sharing of school experiences and friend drama and creative projects reinforced his commitment to change. And Mrs. Kraut Rodriguez's gentle guidance helped him navigate the complexities of single parenting with grace and patience. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the same family room where he'd first witnessed Mrs. Rodriguez reading bedtime stories to Emma. Tonight was different, though. Mrs. Rodriguez's younger son, Carlos, and his wife, Maria, had arrived from Mexico, along with their 2 children. The house felt alive with multiple generations, multiple languages, and the kind of warmth Marcus remembered from his own childhood. Emma was teaching her new cousin Sofia to play chess, while Mrs. Rodriguez helped Maria plan a traditional Mexican dinner for the following evening. Carlos and Marcus discussed business opportunities. Carlos had a background in sustainable agriculture that perfectly aligned with one of Chen Industries' new environmental initiatives. "Daddy, look!" Emma called out. "Sofia already learned how to castle. She's going to be really good at this game." Marcus smiled, watching his daughter's natural leadership abilities shine as she patiently explained strategy to her younger cousin. The lonely, withdrawn child who'd been struggling with grief and abandonment had transformed into a confident, caring young girl who understood the value of family and connection. Later that evening, as the house settled into peaceful quiet, Marcus found Mrs. Rodriguez in the kitchen, preparing ingredients for the next day's cooking lesson with Emma and Sofia. "Any regrets?" he asked. Mrs. Rodriguez considered the question seriously. "About staying? About bringing my family here? About becoming part of your family?" "All of it." "None," she said firmly. "Emma needed advocates, not just caretakers. You needed someone to show you what you were missing while you were building an empire. And I needed to remember that the most important work we do in life isn't always the work that pays us." Marcus nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The most important work of his life had nothing to do with quarterly reports or market dominance. It was about raising a daughter who felt valued and loved, who understood her own worth, and who would carry forward the lessons about kindness and connection that Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For saving my daughter. For saving me. For showing us what family really means." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "You would have figured it out eventually." "Maybe. But Emma couldn't wait eventually. She needed help now, and you were there." The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen. He found Emma teaching Sofia how to flip pancakes while Mrs. Rodriguez supervised, and Carlos told stories about Emma's cooking adventures over the past months. "Daddy," Emma called when she saw him, "Sofia wants to learn the 3 questions tradition. Can we add it to our family rules?" "What 3 questions tradition?" Sofia asked. Emma explained with the same enthusiasm she'd shown during her school presentation. "Every day we ask, what was the best part of your day, what was the hardest part, and what are you excited about for tomorrow?" It helps everyone feel heard. As the family gathered around the breakfast table, a family that now included 5 adults and 3 children, Marcus realized that Mrs. Rodriguez's greatest gift hadn't been filling the void he'd created through his absence. Her gift had been showing him how to build something better than what existed before Victoria's death. They weren't trying to recreate the past. They were creating something new, a chosen family built on presence, attention, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Emma had her father back, but she also had grandparents, cousins, and a model for how families could grow and change while maintaining their core values. "So," Marcus said, looking around the table at faces both familiar and new, "what was the best part of yesterday for everyone?" Emma grinned and raised her hand first. "Learning that families can get bigger instead of just smaller, and that sometimes the best surprises are the ones that take time to unfold." Mrs. Rodriguez reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "Very wise, mija. Very wise indeed." Marcus realized that his daughter had learned something it had taken him 38 years to understand. The most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, earned, or conquered. They could only be received with gratitude and nurtured with consistent presence and love. The business empire he'd built would continue to thrive, but it would never again define his worth or consume his attention at the expense of the people who mattered most. Emma would grow up knowing that she was seen, valued, and cherished not for her achievements, but for her inherent worth as a beloved daughter. And Mrs. Rodriguez would never again have to choose between her own family and her calling to nurture others. She'd found a way to honor both, creating space for everyone to flourish together. As breakfast conversation flowed around him in English and Spanish, punctuated by Emma's animated storytelling and Sophia's curious questions, Marcus felt a peace he hadn't experienced since Victoria's death. This wasn't the family they'd originally planned, but it was the family they'd built together through love, sacrifice, and second chances. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simple act of coming home unannounced and discovering what you've been missing while you were busy looking elsewhere. And sometimes the people we hire to take care of our houses end up taking care of our hearts instead, showing us what it really means to be home.